Got something to say? Get in on the conversation at 415-915-2291. That's 415-915-CALL-1.
Welcome to Conspiracies Against Wellness with your host, Janelle Elgaway.
Good evening. Welcome to Conspiracies Against Wellness. I'm your host, Janelle Elgaway. If you have a question for our guest tonight, please call in at 415-915-2291. Last night, we had Dr. Forrest Tennant on to discuss the war on patients and understand what the opioid crisis is and why chronic pain patients are bunched and targeted with addicts by our medical institutions, government, media, some doctors, and even our family and friends. In efforts to curb opioid use, last month, Justice Department announced a strategy to fight the opioid crisis by stepping up law enforcement, including prosecuting doctors who improperly prescribe painkillers. In March, the agency released a sweeping new prescribing guidelines urging primary care doctors not to prescribe opiates for pain lasting longer than 3 months. Red Lawhern said the CDC protocols have become a mandatory restrictive practice standard, which is driving doctors out of pain management and patients into agony by the thousands. And this is just going on and on and on. Tonight, we are going to discuss the fallout and trend amongst chronic pain patients with a personal story. And this is a wife's story. Becky, welcome to Conspiracies Against Wellness. How are you this evening?
I'm fine, Janelle. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. So can you please tell me a little bit about yourself and your family and who you are?
Sure. Bob and I were married in 1984. We had our daughter, Nicole, in 1985. She's now 32, and she's married, living her life, hoping for some grandbabies there. Mm-hmm. Bob was a very healthy young man until he was 35 when he developed some chronic pain issues. He was athletic. He was a scuba diving, search and rescue diver. He would hike, he would camp, he would boat. He was just living the life. He had a good job. We had a very happy family until chronic pain set in.
Mm-hmm. I want to get into that in a little bit, but let's talk about the day Bob actually took his life. Can you walk me through, like, from the start of your day until it happened? Like, how was Bob that morning emotionally and pain-wise, and what exactly happened?
That was probably the worst day of Bob's life and my life as well. He had been, which we'll get into the particulars later, he had been forcefully removed from opioids, and he was on day 49 of cold turkeying from high doses of opioids to nothing. He was not himself. He was thrashing in pain, and he had been for weeks. He was, Bob was a very laid back kind of a guy, and he was almost belligerent that day because he felt like no one would help him with his pain. And we had to go do blood work, believe it or not, that morning, and I had to bring him in a wheelchair, and he was actually rude to the nurse, and Bob was never rude to a nurse in all these years, and I was very upset with him for being rude to the nurse because that's just not who he was. He considered himself a gentleman, and it was like he was another person entirely. And we had reached out to healthcare professional after healthcare professional, and they all kept saying no, and I think that Bob just felt he was at the end of his rope and nobody was going to help him, so he just He was even mean to me at one point, and that was just not who he was.
Yeah, you mentioned you guys got into a fight and there's an exchange of words. What was your... can you explain what happened exactly, if you don't mind?
I can. I'm not proud of it. We were a couple. We got along pretty well. I mean, we had our arguments. Every couple does. But in the end, we were a loving couple. And when he came home from doing his blood work, he was just getting more and more agitated because he was in so much pain and he felt so hopeless and despondent. But instead of feeling sorry for himself, he would do, which a lot of men do, they act out, and it was outward, and he was hostile, and he was,
Yeah. Well, and I think that
and
happens a lot though when you're in pain like that, And I mean, this is just real life.
Yes.
I mean, this is how it is sometimes, I think.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
It is. And he did. This is kind of embarrassing. He asked me for a bowl of rice because he felt, through all the vomiting, he felt he should eat some rice. So I brought him a bowl of rice. And then he said, "You forgot the salt. How could you forget the salt? What's wrong with you?" So I went to get the salt. And by the time I walked back into the living room to hand him the salt, he threw the bowl of rice against the wall and said, "What took you so effing long?" And I just snapped because this was not the man I loved. He was just acting like an animal, just a primal animal in so much pain. Mm-hmm. And I threw the salt shaker and I said, "I don't need this crap. I'm leaving." Mm-hmm. And I left. And I felt really bad about that. Yeah. Because the last thing I said to him that day was, "I'm not taking this crap," and I left. We left in words of anger. And
so you left. What happens while you're gone, and or that you know of at least?
Well, I left about 1, and I came home about 3:30. And this is the part that I will forever regret: is he called me. I wasn't halfway up my street, and the phone rang, and I let it go to voicemail. He called me an hour later. I let it go to voicemail. He called me about a half an hour after that, and I let it go to voicemail. I was really mad, and I just needed a break because the tension had been building over the last 49 days as things became more and more desperate. And he snapped, and I snapped, and I just needed a break from him.
You're human.
And then I finally, some days. So I finally, about 4:30, I was like, okay, I'm going to listen to the voicemail. And I knew by the voicemail that he was really in a bad state of mind. And he said, "If you want to see me again, you better get home." And I was like, is this an idle threat? What's going on? Right. So I went home because people say things when they're angry and they don't always mean it. And so I finally get home and I go in the house, and the salt and the rice are still laying all over the floor. And Bob was a neat freak, and he hadn't picked it up. I couldn't find him anywhere. So, of course, I cleaned the rice up because I'm a wife, and that's what we do. We clean messes. Mm-hmm. So I'm figuring maybe he wasn't in great shape. I couldn't imagine that he was out for a walk. He could barely stand up. But I'm like, maybe he just, we live near the woods. Maybe he went out to sit on the edge of the woods. Maybe he's just taking a little time to decompress. I walked through the house. I couldn't find him. So finally I walked around the yard. And then we live at the end of a dead-end street. And I walked to the very end of our property where you can't see it from the house, and you can't see it from the neighbor's house, and you can't see it from the street. It's out by a shed. And as I walked down the path to the shed, I saw Bob in an Adirondack chair, a yellow Adirondack chair. And I saw him sitting in the chair, and he was slumped over. Mm-hmm. And I ran to him. I thought he had had a seizure. I had seen him in that exact same position many times. And sometimes high emotions brought seizures on. First of all, I didn't know how he even got out there. He could barely walk, but he somehow dragged that chair down there and dragged himself down there, and he was sitting there. So I was shaking him, and he still, he felt like you and I, his legs and his muscles, everything felt normal. And then I realized he was very cold. So I took his pulse, and I didn't feel a pulse, and then I thought he maybe had a seizure and his heart had stopped. That had happened before many years ago, and they had resuscitated him. So I wasn't completely flipped out. Mm-hmm. And then I was trying to shake him and shake him and shake him. He wasn't moving, but there was no blood, and I could not figure out why. And then I just started to check his body, and that's when I saw the gun. It was in his hand that was on the other side of the chair away from me, and it had slumped down under the Adirondack chair, but it was still in his hand. And that's when I started to lose it, and I started to cry.
Right.
And I realized that he had probably shot himself.
Did you know where? Could you see anything?
I could see no blood. That's why I still
That's
didn't
strange.
know if he had shot himself or had a seizure.
Right.
That was the strange thing. And I later found out it was the gauge of the gun. It was a 25 millimeter or whatever you call it, and apparently that doesn't make an exit wound.
Okay.
So it's a very non-messy way to die.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of blood, and sometimes they don't know until the coroner looks. I found that out later.
You did mention a quote. Do you remember your quote? You said to me,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I called 911.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the quote comes in. And I called 911, and I told them that I had just found my husband, apparent suicide at the end of our street. And they immediately said, don't touch the body. I said, I can't. I've been shaking him. I've been checking for a pulse. He's my husband. I'm trying to revive him. They said, don't touch him. I said, okay. Of course, I'm crying hysterically. I'm calm now. I'm surprised they could hear me. And this is what you're referring to. They said, can you get someone to come and sit with you?
Mm-hmm.
My 80-year-old parents live upstairs in the same house we live in. And my neighbors across the street are of similar age. They're all very, very attached to Bob. And I said to the operator, I said, this is my hell, and I'm going to deal with it myself. I am not going to bring my parents down here to see his dead body and possibly become another victim because they have a heart attack or a stroke. I said, I sat there with his body on the phone with the 911 operator for approximately 10 minutes waiting for an officer to arrive.
Wow.
But it was a choice I made because I didn't want anyone else to have to deal with that hell.
I'm so sorry.
It just, sitting there with his dead body was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And then when the police officer came, he made me, it's a funny layout. He made me step away from the body, and we lived very close to the woods. This is so silly. There's predators, there's bears, there's coyotes, and we stepped about 15 feet away from it, and I started going into hysterics. I said, don't leave him alone.
Mm-hmm.
Can't leave him alone. There's predators. In my irrational, I thought that they were going to eat him. So he said, my partner's right behind me. He's going to stay with the body. The body won't be left alone. Mm-hmm. And so then you go through the horror. It becomes an automatic. I have a friend who's a cop, and he later explained it to me. A suicide becomes an automatic murder investigation until they figure out what exactly happened.
Okay.
So no one's allowed to leave. When the ambulance came, my parents, of course, are trying to come out of the house, and I said to one of the paramedics, I said, you go up there and you corral those two people in that house and do not let them come down here because I don't want them to see him. They loved Bob so much. He was like their son. So one paramedic dealt with that. The other one declared that Bob was dead. And I was in absolute hysterics trying to speak to the police officer. And the most important thing I heard from the one paramedic is he says, all you can do is one breath at a time. He says, I was in combat in Iraq, and I saw people kill themselves that I cared about very much. And he said, all you can do is one breath at a time. And that's the best advice I got for a long time because it was just so hard. The next few hours were just so hard. And our daughter was out to eat with her husband, and we couldn't get a hold of her because we have bad reception in Vermont. Mm-hmm. It took her half an hour to get the message, and then when she finally did arrive, I had, at that point, gone inside with my parents, and some of the neighbors were coming in to sit with us while the whole murder investigation was going on at the end of the street. Mm. And I had my dad posted at the end of the driveway, and I said, when she drives in that driveway, you stop her.
Yeah.
Don't let her get out of the car. You come and get me because I have to be the one to tell her that her daddy is dead. I don't want her to hear it from anyone else. So I had to go and tell our baby, 32-year-old baby, that her daddy had killed himself. And the first thing she said to me is, Mommy, you promised me you won't follow him. I don't want to be an orphan. And I had to promise her that. And, of course, I'm not a suicidal type of person, but I knew where she was coming from because we were so close. He was my soulmate. He was everything to me. We went through so much with his health, and to just have him gone like that, it just...
Yeah.
And he was just the kind of guy. He had been through so many health struggles.
Do you know if he passed away immediately? Did they say, or I mean, did he suffer?
They did. When I got the coroner's report, they said that he died instantly to a gunshot wound to the mouth, and there were multiple skull fractures. But they did say it was immediate, so at least his suffering ended quickly.
Right. Did you or people close to you suspect Bob was suicidal?
No, nobody. We knew that he was in desperate pain. He started to refuse to see people.
Okay.
The last 6 weeks of his life, because the pain was so great, he would not even let our daughter come in the house, or her husband. He wouldn't let my mother and father come in. He only let me come in, and sometimes even then he'd ask me to go in the other room because he was just suffering so much, and it was just awful.
You mentioned you found a love letter after his death. Did you want to talk about that at all?
A couple of months after he died, I was cleaning a drawer and I found a love letter that he had written to me a few months before, and he had mentioned something in the letter that we had weird conversations because he was sick for so long, and he had died and been resuscitated once. That he understood that his mortality was very close for him, and we had conversations that he would probably die before me.
Yeah.
And that if we died, and he mentioned this in his letter, he said, if we ever die in the middle of a fight, just forget all the bad words we said, because in the end we've always loved each other. So that was so healing for me to find that, because we had the conversations, but I found it in the letter.
Yeah. By the way, I do believe that that's kind of a normal thing when you are in that, like when you're a chronic pain patient. I mean, as we spoke the other day, I have those thoughts, and I kind of have my whole thing of, I know I'm going to probably not live like a normal person. So I think that's kind of normal, and the more people I meet,
Yes.
that's the same. It's like almost the same story.
Hear it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So did he ever have a plan?
Yeah.
Did you guys talk about a plan and stuff like that? Or did he talk about a plan or of committing suicide, or what he wanted to do? Or no, it was just, was this really out of...
He never made a plan, but he made a few vague references during the summer. He says, I don't know if I can live like this. I don't know if I can live in this kind of pain forever. But Bob was a warrior. He suffered so many things, and he always bounced back. I mean, he should have been dead about 3 times, and he came back. So for him to take this drastic of a step, it had to be just hopeless in his mind.
Why did he commit suicide? Because he was just so hopeless? I mean, we're going to go into detail in it.
Would it be okay?
Sure.
Can I read his suicide note, which we found that night in my underwear drawer, actually?
Absolutely.
It wasn't on his body. I found it, yeah. And he said, I, Bob, cannot take the chronic pain anymore. No one except my wife and my family has helped me. The doctors are really puppets trying to lower expenses and not expect any responsibility. Besides, people will die, and doctors have seen it all. So why help me? I'm expendable and no threat. This life has been taken by myself. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? He felt that hopeless, that no one was going to help him.
No. That's horrible.
Those are his words, and I felt it was important for him, his words, to be heard.
Yeah.
And that's how he felt. He felt completely alone, and he loved me so much that I know that he couldn't do it while I was in the house. And he did it where we couldn't see him from the house, so that we could continue to live there.
Do you think he was pushing you away purposely that day to be able to do this? Do you think, because...
In hindsight, yes, because Bob was the oldest of 6. He was a nurturer. He was a big brother. He was always protecting all of his little chicks, whether it was his brothers and sisters or his wife or his family. He was always protecting everybody. So looking back on it, I think he did snap to a certain extent that last day, but I also think he pushed me away so he could do this when I wasn't home. Yeah. He did not. He knew I couldn't take it.
Why are you sharing his story? Why are you sharing your story? Why come out and do all this?
What happened to Bob was inhumane, and I think it's happening to a lot of other chronic pain patients in this country. People, a lot of it gets back to what Dr. Tennant said so perfectly last night. People are being tortured to death for political reasons, for guidelines that don't make any sense, for misinterpretation of guidelines. There are millions of people that are suffering, and there's been quite a few suicides.
Yes.
And I think that we need to speak out. And a lot of people are afraid to speak out because they fear repercussions, especially people who still have chronic pain within their family. They're afraid they're going to get cut off from the little bit of relief that they have if they speak out publicly.
Yeah.
So I think that we that are able to speak out need to speak out. And I'm hoping to promote awareness so we can band together and we can promote this awareness together. We need strength in numbers. And if someone with a drastic story will come forward, and there's more than one of me, trust me, there's a few more out there. If we can all come forward, then maybe they will listen to us. Maybe the government will listen to us.
Yeah, I agree. I think if we do come together, because there's strength in numbers, if we do this, they will have to listen. And it's not that they will have to. I think we need to make them listen. It has to be. Yeah. So I want to go back to the beginning where all this started with, so people can understand exactly why he was pushed so far to be able to say, okay, I want to take my life. I do not want to live on this earth anymore because of what was going on. So when did your husband's health issues first start, and what happened exactly?
He was fairly healthy until he was 35. He had, these are his words, I had 2 congenital birth defects which exploded. One was urological. Yeah, those were his words. He had a megaureter which had been completely not diagnosed all through his childhood and young adulthood. It just never cropped up. Nobody thought to look for it. And there was kidney reflux, and the ureter basically was constricted on one end and blew up on the other. So it did kidney damage, ureter damage, and bladder damage. Wow. He had to have that surgically repaired in 98. And then the other source was in 2006, he had an undiagnosed arterial venous malformation in his brain, which bled.
Oh, no.
He should have died from that, but he didn't. He had emergency surgery, and he survived. I mean, this guy's a walking miracle.
Yeah, he's strong.
Getting back to, he's amazing, let me tell you. The interstitial cystitis was a result of it set in after the urological surgery, which it's common. It happens a lot. So he was left with a lot of bladder pain, ureter flank pain. He made multiple kidney stones. He probably passed a kidney stone every single month at home. Yeah. He went to the hospital for the first couple of years, and then he's like, I'm just going to do this at home.
Yeah. Yeah, because it becomes like a full-time job going to the doctors and everything.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. And then, and it wasn't so bad until recently. The ERs, you know how the ERs treat people with chronic pain.
Yes.
That's a whole nother story. So Doug had the interstitial cystitis, I think, is an autoimmune disease as well. It's one of those like diseases that not a lot is known about, but they're starting to do more and more research.
Okay.
It's very, very hard to treat.
Is it hard to diagnose?
He went through.
Was it easy to diagnose?
It's very hard to diagnose.
Okay.
We had to go through 3 urologists before we found one who could diagnose it. It was that hard to diagnose, and it's really hard to treat. And they treated it with all the non-opioid therapies you can imagine from 1999 until 2004. I mean, he did the tricyclic antidepressants, he did the Neurontin, he did the antihistamines, the TENS, the cognitive behavioral therapy, everything that was at their disposal at that point they did, and he failed every single one of them. So they finally sent him to a pain clinic in 2004, and they tried a few different opioids, hydrocodone, zodone, Zydone. They did They didn't try any of the long-lasting ones. They tried a fentanyl patch, but it leaked, and that kind of
Oh, that's
turned
not
Doug
good.
off, and it didn't work all that well.
Yeah.
No, it leaked. He had one of those leaky batches of Durgesics.
Oh.
And then and then finally the pain clinic settled on methadone. And they put him on quite a high dose of methadone with first dilaudid for breakthrough, then we realized that was giving him migraines, so they took him off that. And they did the high dose of methadone with a low dose of oxycodone for rescue.
Did it work?
And that worked pretty well.
Okay.
It did.
How long did it take you guys to find that?
I would say it probably took 2 years to settle on a proper dose, because in the middle of all this, he had brain surgery, because they started in 2004. The brain surgery was in 2006.
Wow.
So, and after the brain surgery, they had to put the dose way up there to get the relief, because it was just, pretty massive surgery.
Did he have trouble with
and then
with getting used to the pain medicine? Because I know with opiates, your tolerance just kind of keeps going up. Or was he able to? He didn't have to take the same amount all the time. Once he wasn't in that emergency mode and the extreme pain up front, was he able to kind of go lower?
He did try to go lower a few times, just because he always said to me when they first diagnosed him and they first gave him methadone, his first reaction was, "I'm not a heroin junkie. I don't need methadone. That's just for addicts." And I said, "Listen, if the doctor thinks that's what you need, then that's what you need."
Right. Well, and a lot of people think that's what it is.
Really did work.
Yeah. I mean, it's always in the media. It's everywhere else. I mean, it just looks like that everybody's drug addicts pretty much.
Yeah, we didn't tell people for years that he was on methadone. We just said, for a while we told people he was on opioids, and then it became so much of a stigma that we almost just didn't talk about it anymore, because we didn't really want to hear about other people's opinions.
Right.
Some people knew and some people didn't know. But once they settled on a dose with the methadone, and after the brain surgery they had to get it up to a very high dose in order to be effective, it was the pain clinic that he went to stopped writing for opioids in 2008, and they bounced the ball into the primary court to write the prescriptions, because all the pain clinics wanted to focus on were procedures, which is really common with pain clinics in this country at that time. Mm-hmm. So from 2008 to 2014, he was stable. He was at a high dose. He was on 240 milligrams of methadone per day, and he was on 30 milligrams of oxycodone for breakthrough pain until 2014. He was really stable at that dose. Mm-hmm. And then two things happened. In 2013, he had to have bariatric surgery, which failed and had to be revised. So he was left with a lot of malabsorption issues. And in 2014, this is 3 months after the last bariatric surgery with malabsorption issues, the primary, for whatever reason, he never told us exactly why he was doing this, decided that he wanted Bob off the oral meds and he wanted him on a pain pump. So we're like, okay, fine. So he refers us to a different pain clinic who weans him off all opioids over the course of 32 days, and then at the 11th hour says, well, your insurance won't pay for the pain pump. And then the primary wanted to leave him off the opioids, and we said, no, you can't do that. So we put him back on a much lower dose, which we think was part of...
Was there anything that caused this behavior? I mean, did you guys do anything on your side, or did he warn you at all?
No. It really took us out of left field, because Bob had just had bariatric surgery, which has painful. Documented malabsorption issues. Mm-hmm. And all of the other medications had to be raised. He was on a bunch of seizure medicines, and they had to raise the doses because he wasn't absorbing it properly. The bladder medicines had to be raised for the same reason. And then miraculously, the opioids are going to be cut from 240 to about 90. How is that going to work? He's still recovering from the surgery, and they're giving him, what's that, a third of the dose?
Right. And there's the law that says that they're not supposed to, I think it's 10% you're supposed to lower over time. Like, you're not just supposed to do that amount. Okay. Yeah. So so he was a mess at this point then. I mean, so was it like night and day of his life? Was he at least having a quality of life before he could go out and kind of go to dinners with families and stuff? And then to what?
Yes. Until 2014, he he could participate in the family. He was disabled, but he could get up every morning. One of the things that was really important to him, he said, if I'm disabled, I still need to take care of my family. I work full time. He would get up early and bring me coffee in bed every morning, and then leave me alone for 20 minutes until I woke up, then come back and serve me breakfast. And sometimes he wasn't feeling good, but he said, I have to do this. This is important to me. This was the caregiver in Bob. This is who he was. It was important for him. It was important for him to do the dishes and the laundry. He felt like he needed to contribute. And then in 2014, I could see his frustration when they started to take these medicines away from him, because sometimes he always managed to bring me the coffee and the breakfast, but sometimes the dishes didn't get done. Sometimes the housework didn't get done. Sometimes the laundry didn't get done, because he had to spend the rest of the day laying on the couch because he was in a lot of pain. And he didn't have the opportunity to live the normal quality of life that he had before that. Right. And we reported this to the doctor over and over and over, and he was so adamant that he had to be at 90 milligrams or close to it. Right. And we kept saying, first of all, the higher milligrams were better, and second of all, the malabsorption, he should be on even more than he was. Right. And the doctor, we never understood until after Bob died what the fascination was with the number 90. But we figured that out. I figured that out about 3 months later.
And we're going to take a really quick break, and then I want to know why, what you figured out. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Coming soon, Caw 360 Network, with great shows such as Save Our Children, Eden's Living, Enhancing Your World, Wake Sheep, and of course, Conspiracies Against Wellness, and with new topics and faces that will educate, enlighten, and inform. Think of it as your one stop for your daily dose of truth, and you'll be able to get it on the one source you get the Caw show on now. So no hunting all over the internet to find a new link or download new software. We're working hard on the new format and lining up great shows, so stay tuned. Caw 360 Network is going to rock your world. Got something to say? Get in on the conversation at 415-915-2291. That's 415-915-CAW1.
Welcome back to Conspiracies Against Wellness. We are here with Becky. She is talking about the suicide death of her husband, Bob. By the way, I was just talking with Brian here, and we were just like, wow, this is just such a heavy story. We are so thankful that you've decided to come on and share it with us, and I just thank you so much.
My honor. Thank you.
You're welcome. So we were about to talk about the 90. What does 90 milligrams of morphine or whatever it is? Because I didn't understand that either. So please let us know.
What I found out a few months after Bob died, I did some digging because I was just beside myself, and I like to research, and I had to figure out what was going on. And it turns out in 2014, as I understand it, the CDC offered some new guidelines to prescribing doctors, encouraging them not to go over 90 milligrams for all patients whenever possible.
And it was offered. It was a guideline, right? It wasn't like that they had to do that.
It was. Yes, it was a voluntary guideline. That's the word I kept hearing over and over again, voluntary guideline.
Did your doctor say
this? And
what
I got out of it, he did not. He just, he never really said. And it was really funny because Bob kept telling me in 2014, first when we went to the pain clinic for the pump that never happened, and then when the doctor kept trying, we call him Dr. Evil, by the way, when Dr. Evil kept trying to lower the dose, Bob kept saying to me, Bob was very intuitive, being the oldest of six. He goes, there's more going on here than you realize. I go, what is it? He goes, I don't know, but something is different.
Oh, he was right.
Said, Dr. Evil went from being very willing to help us, very compassionate. He wrote us a letter, I can't find it now, but I found it at one point in 2010 that said that Bob was taking a higher dose of methadone than usual, but it was okay. He was under Dr. Evil's care. And then all of a sudden, 4 years later, Bob just kept feeling like Dr. Evil was trying to wean him off the methadone completely.
Let me ask you something.
Against his will.
Did doctors or surgeons or whatever, because of all of his health issues, did they ever say, you're never going to have any issues about anything being taken away because it's about your quality of life here at this point? So, we will make sure you're always comfortable. Did they ever say something like that to you?
Yes, we had quite a few. Bob had a neurologist that was at an Ivy League college, and he said to Bob that he would probably be on methadone for the rest of his life, based on the fact that whenever Bob would try to go too far down, taper too far, it triggered seizures.
Right.
So the neurologist told him, you will most likely have to be on methadone, even at a low dose, for your whole life for neurological reasons.
Yeah. Well, and as Dr. Tennant stated last night, he said, you will get health issues if your body is in a constant
Yes.
a high level of pain, like other issues, cancers, all that other. There's a ton of things that you could get.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Wow.
And Bob had seizures that were triggered with the quick sudden tapering or the sudden discontinuation. He had severe seizures often. Mm-hmm. He had chest pain all the time. He thought he was having a heart attack for the last month of his life because he had been cold turkeying from the medication.
I have more. Yeah, I have more questions about that. I just want to stick right here quickly, though.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, that's all right. And was it 2013? They wanted to put Bob on a pain pump. Why did they want to do that, and what was that going to help him with? Why couldn't he just take oral medication?
That was actually in 2014.
Okay.
It was shortly after the bariatric surgery. And what Bob kept telling me is, I think Dr. Evil is trying to find a way to not be responsible for my opioids. And I told Bob, you're paranoid. The healthcare system has more checks and balances in this. And he kept saying, I just have this feeling. He's trying to get me off these opioids so he can wash his hands from me, basically. He doesn't want to deal with prescribing the opioids. And that's why Dr. Evil sent him for the pain pump. And then.
And what happened with that? Because he didn't get it. Why didn't he get it?
The doctor at the pain clinic gave him a 32-day taper. And on day 31, he literally called Bob up and said, you don't meet the criteria for your insurance company. They're not going to pay for it. We're going to cancel the surgery.
Really?
For the pain pump.
Wow.
Because there's not a code for interstitial cystitis. And the doctor at the pain clinic kept telling us that there was a code for it, and then miraculously at the 11th hour there wasn't a code for it. So Bob, in his devious mind, thought that was a way of getting him weaned off the medication. Where you live, is it a big area? Are there a lot of doctors or hospitals or options for you guys, or the one doctor you have, is that who you go to? Okay. All right. Yes, we have to travel. We live in a very small state, in a very small town. There's like maybe a few doctors here, but in order to have any specialty care, we had to travel 2 hours in any direction for urologists or neurologists or pain management or anything outside of the general care. Okay. Wow. So now, Did Bob, so was there new laws that you knew about, or was there something that Bob did? Did he take his medicine incorrectly? Like, what was going on that because usually, I know there's the tapering, but why so sudden? Was there something that created that for him, from Dr. Evil? I later pieced together that Dr. Evil was just freaking out about the new guidelines that were instigated in 2014, and he simply wanted Bob on that magical dose or off altogether. And to be honest, Bob was not perfect between 2014 and 2016. He ran out early several times because the pain was so overwhelming. He would take an extra pill and run out a couple of days early and call for a refill. Would they do that? And I think that probably... Yeah. They would refill it, but I think by May of 2016, which is actually 2 months later than the newest guidelines that had come out, that were even more strict with the CDC, that's when that hit the fan. Yeah, because actually, I usually they don't let you refill early, or the doctor will say tough or whatever, but it sounded like he was in that type of pain. I think they knew. I think they just wanted to hold off as much as they could.
I couldn't imagine going through things like that. So, at what point what does Dr. Evil do for him at this point for pain control, and are other health issues starting to come up besides the seizures? I mean, what's life like at that point?
Bob was having more and more seizures as the pain was less controlled. So the answer to that was increase the seizure medicines at the neurologist's discretion. Let's, pump him full of more Depakote, which brings down your white cell count.
What is he supposed to do for his pain?
That's what we kept asking. We said, how can we please have a higher milligram? That his pain is not addressed. Right. He is in a lot of pain. And Dr. Evil just would not budge. So Bob ran out early several times, and Dr. Evil finally, in May of 2016, threw down the gauntlet and said, I'm done. He said, here's the last 30 days. I'm not going to prescribe for you anymore. I'm not going to risk my license for you anymore. I'm sick of the early refills, and the methadone clinic can deal with you.
Okay, so now you go to the methadone clinic. What happens there?
We go to the methadone clinic. The methadone clinic spends an hour doing an intake, and they say, you are not an addict. You are a chronic pain patient. We're federally mandated to only treat addicts. We can't help you. So Bob says, what do I do? I can't just go from, a high dose to a low dose in 30 days. It's not safe. You have to be tapered.
Exactly.
So they say go to a detox center. So in our lovely little state, there's exactly one detox center about 3 hours from here that will accept Medicare, and they only do 7-day detoxes. So he has to go through 2 rounds to get from 90 to 40 and then from 40 to 0. So by the beginning of July, he's on 0, and he comes home for 3 weeks. We call Dr. Evil every single day. He's thrashing in bed. He's having mini seizures. He has severe myoclonus, which is a byproduct of the seizure activity, where if he tries to stand up, sometimes his legs collapse or he shakes. He can't control a lot of his motor skills. All of these symptoms are revving up. He's throwing up all the time. He's shaking. He's weak. He's vomiting. His arms and legs are just like jerking left and right. This goes on for 3 weeks. We beg Dr. Evil every single day to put him back on some opioids. So he finally does at the end of July.
A quick question. Does he go through withdrawal when he just cuts him down like that? I mean, that wasn't a...
Oh, yes.
Yes. What was like withdrawals like? I mean, I couldn't...
Withdrawals were awful. He was so sensitive to withdrawals that we once ran out early and we went to Dr. Evil's office and we were waiting in the waiting room and Dr. Evil wasn't there, so we were waiting to see his partner. And Doug hadn't had a dose in maybe 6 hours, and he had a seizure in the waiting room. So Dr. Evil's partner comes out, waits for Bob to come out of the seizure, and then yells at him. Never in my 41 years have I ever seen anyone have a seizure when they're withdrawing from methadone. I think you're faking it. Meanwhile, it was full tonic-clonic seizure that he had right there.
Oh my goodness.
With all these witnesses.
And nobody does anything.
We had to shut up. Nobody does anything.
That's an atrocity. That's horrible.
Yeah. We had to sit there and let him finish his little, discussion and his yelling at us like we were 3 years old. And then he finally said, I'm going to write you enough methadone until Dr. Evil comes back. Because, yeah. So it's well documented that it brought on seizures in him if he was withdrawing. Not to mention the electric, he told me it felt like there were electrical shocks running up and down his arms and his legs, and he was jerking and twitching like he was like almost plugged into a socket. He said it was awful.
Yeah.
And his heart hurt and his chest hurt. His pulse was down in the low 40s, sometimes the low 30s, which is not very high. He was low anyway.
Yeah, that's very dangerous.
It's very dangerous.
Oh, wow.
He was athletic, so he always had a low pulse, but it was getting really scary.
So he tried to send you to the rehab place. Then they send you back to who? Dr. Evil or pain management? Where do you go next?
They sent us back to Dr. Evil, who finally relents and puts Bob back on a low dose, like 40 milligrams of methadone a day.
Does that help him at that
No
point?
breakthrough.
Because, I mean, he probably went through the withdrawals at that point.
Anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, he that wasn't enough to do much. He still wasn't much better off, but he was a little bit better off.
Okay.
And then it all came to a head on August 31st when Bob ran out. He ran out 2 days early because they were doing a week-to-week script at that point. They wanted tighter control, which I guess is pretty common now, but at that time it wasn't.
Yes.
And Bob called on a Wednesday and said, I ran out. It's not due till Friday. Can I get a script? I was at work. Dr. Evil went off on him, and he said, for the second time, I'm not going to risk my license writing scripts for you anymore. The methadone clinic can deal with your daily dosing. Bob said to him, they don't do that. He says, well, I'm going to call and make a referral. Fine. We go to the methadone clinic that day. They say, we'll do an evaluation. We need the properly coded referral from Dr. Evil. So this is Wednesday afternoon. We call every day for a week. They send the referral and it's not properly coded. Finally, they get the properly coded referral 8 days later. And every day you go to the methadone clinic, they make you think they're going to give you a dose and then they don't.
Oh, no.
So meanwhile, the withdrawals are getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And so on day 8, when they finally get the referral, we go in thinking, okay, they're going to start dosing. No, we have to schedule an orientation, which is 2 weeks from now.
So they kind of keep...
What do we do in the meantime?
Right. But they
string you along.
Right.
They string you along.
That is not... Okay.
So at that point, the withdrawals are so bad, they say you might want to go to detox. We call the detox center, and they said you don't meet the criteria for your insurance because it's too long between doses. So detox is out.
Okay,
the methadone clinic is stringing them along.
So they dry them out, basically, rather quickly.
Yes.
Then they send you around everywhere. They string you along. And then finally, when you get to go back to the rehab place or whatever, they're like, oh, well, we can't because you don't have it in your system long enough. Have you guys ever, I know this is terrible, but I've heard stories about this. Did he ever think about, you know what, I'll go to street drugs just to get it in my system, just to show up to have something in me? Did he ever think that?
You know,
did you ever say it?
Bob was a very honorable person, and he knew that he had 3 choices. And he even said this to me one time. He said, I can either choose to live with this pain, or I can turn to street drugs, or I can commit suicide. And he said, I'll be damned if I'll ever go down that road with street drugs.
Yeah.
Because once you go down it, it's hard to turn back.
Well, the thing is, too, is he put up such a fight to get on pain medicine even, you know, so I would have to imagine that way. I just didn't know if he was, like, willing to maybe do it just to get in there, but he wouldn't.
And this is all leading up. And meanwhile, we're calling Dr. Evil, begging him to help. He's, no, I'm not going to write any scripts for you. You know, he's very adamant. So finally...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay. The methadone clinic finally culminates their evaluation October 7th. So this has been going on 5 or 6 weeks. And the director doesn't have the nerve to do it. So she sends in an RN who tells us, meanwhile, you do UAs every week, you do blood work, you do everything to measure your progress during this 5-week period. Mm-hmm. And the nurse says to us, you passed all your UAs, there was nothing illegal in your blood. Therefore, you are not an addict. You are a chronic pain patient. We're only federally mandated to treat addicts. You fall between the cracks, and there's nothing we can do to help you. And I get extremely angry.
I would
and
too.
I said, is this how chronic pain patients are treated? They fall between the cracks. I said, if this is the way it's going to go, you're going to see a rash of suicides. I said, it's just a matter of time because nobody can live like this. And she said, we already have. She said, now had you turned to street drugs and you had, excuse the expression,
they said this.
Pissed dirty.
Wow.
Yes, then we could have treated you, and Bob would still be alive today.
Wow.
Had he turned to street drugs. But he was too honorable a man to do that. I mean, his honor cost him his life, so was he really all that smart? I don't know. But he lived as he believed, and he said to me, I will not do that. I will not go down that road. I will not do it.
That was one of his morals,
So he knew when we left that methadone clinic.
Yeah.
One of his morals. It was strong in him.
Yeah.
He had his code of honor and his code of conduct, and he was not going to become someone else. And one of the last things that I'm not real proud of this, but Bob said to the nurse, he said, Becky, just stop talking. I go, why? I was getting really irritated and I was yelling, which I don't usually do. And he said, they don't care about chronic pain patients. He said, this place is a place where they give the addicts a few cookies every day to keep the streets clean. That's all they're here to do. They're cleaning up the streets. Give the junkies, and this, he didn't mean any disrespect to
No,
the
I know,
addicts,
but you know what? He's
give
intuitive.
the junkies a little bit.
It makes sense, though, right?
Yeah.
Because they would have to
he's
steal
very
and do
intuitive.
other things and you know, rob people
Exactly.
possibly if they didn't have the way to get their drugs. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
wow.
And the question that we've always had is, why are there programs in place for addicts? If you look, there's a million ways to help addicts clean up.
Oh, yeah.
But chronic pain patients have no avenue.
Even when I was
They're
researching
cut off.
for this week about all of this stuff, and I mean, I'm a chronic pain patient too, but I needed to know more. You know what was popping up on everything? There's ads for pharmaceutical drugs everywhere. I was just so surprised, and I mean, they would almost cover the whole screen, like you're having to tap on all of them to get them off so I could read about what we're talking about right now.
Yes.
It's like they don't want you to learn. They don't want you to know any of this.
No, they don't. And only the chronic pain patients and their families are really aware of this, because when I have this conversation with people who don't have someone with chronic pain, they're horrified.
Well, let me
They're
ask,
like, what do you mean this is how people are treated?
you live in a small community. So I know how I grew up in a small town too. So I get how small town minded, everybody talks, everybody knows everybody's business. Did they know about Dr. Evil? Did they know what he was doing? Did anybody else go through this in your area that you could actually like see and talk to there? Or was it just you and your husband and your family?
After the fact, I spoke to one person in a hair salon who said, oh, yeah, Dr. Evil did that to my husband.
Really?
We switched doctors.
Wow.
But they had to go 3 hours away to find another doctor.
Okay. And
So
that's
It
hard.
was not the first time.
Yeah.
It is hard. I mean, it's hard.
Yeah.
You know, I work full time. He was ill. Sometimes he could drive, sometimes he couldn't. There wasn't always someone to take him. That's a whole day, driving there 3 hours, having an appointment, coming back. You know, it's.
Well,
Somebody's gotta
and then
make
when
the
you have a
money
lot
in
of
the
appointments
family.
on top of each other because he had surgeries
Yes.
and he had all these other health issues, so you're probably running all the time. Like I said, it's a full-time job. That's how
Constantly.
I used to feel. And when you have chronic pain, you go through periods like that often. I mean, you'll have some downtimes when you're not, but it's not fun. So
It is not fun.
So what is Bob's quality of life off all opiates, off all pain medication? What is his life like then? I mean, what's that bottom?
After the methadone clinic rejected him, he went home, he went to bed, and he was thrashing in pain. He was just vomiting. He was so miserable. He was jerking and twitching, and his chest hurt, and his pulse was low. We thought he was having a heart attack at one point. But when you go to the ER, once they see opioids, they're just like, we don't treat chronic pain, and
Right.
they really don't do anything for you, and then they dismiss you. They're very prejudiced.
So
against
I have
anyone who takes
he's
opioids.
doing this in front of people, right? Like he's having these convulsions and tics and all these things. So they
Yes.
see this stuff. It's not like
Yes.
okay.
Yes. Yes. Oh, we went to the neurologist in the middle of all of this, in the middle of September, and Doug had one of his seizures there. The neurologist was very concerned. He said, you're having withdrawals, you're having seizures. I think you should be back on the opioids. He says, but I have a policy that I will not go against the prescribing doctor's wishes.
So why
And
didn't
Dr. Evil doesn't want me to put you back on opioids, so he wouldn't put him back on opioids. He said, but
I
I'll
mean,
give
did
you
he have
some
something out for
clonazepam,
you?
which is
I don't understand. Wow. I'm so sorry.
It's like Dr. Evil had convinced everyone that his way was it, and no one would step on his toes. We had an appointment a couple of days after Bob died to go see the bariatric surgeon. He was our last hope to see if he would consider, but we never made it there. That's why we were doing the blood work that day, was for him.
How does
but-
this affect everybody living around you when things like this is? What's life like for everybody else?
Life has been really hard. The day that Bob died, the last thing he did the day before he died was saw Dr. Evil, and Dr. Evil yet again rejected him, said he wouldn't risk his license writing opioids for him. We begged him. We said, can you please admit him to the hospital or put him in assisted living or do the daily dosing yourself? Something. He cannot survive like this. He cannot stand up. He cannot walk. He's shaking. He's vomiting. He was so ill. And Dr. Evil stood right there and looked at him. He goes, he's not in very good shape, is he? And I said, no, he can't go on like this. He needs help. He says, I'll give you a referral back to the pain clinic.
Oh my
I
goodness.
said, the pain clinic won't write opioids. He says, that's all I can do for you. Go home and wait for the call from my referral section. It takes a referral section 2 weeks to call you if you're lucky, and
Well,
then
you
you
already
have
know
to
what
make the appointment
happens.
with the pain clinic.
Right.
Yes. So basically what we got out of it was go home. You're not worth treating. There's no supportive care. We have nothing for you here. That's what we got out of it.
So go home and die, basically. He gave him a death
Pretty
sentence.
much. And that's it. He might as well put the gun in his hand.
Yeah.
And Bob came home that night, and we, he spent a very painful night. And then the next day is when I woke up the next morning, that's when he had turned into like this primal animal, and he was just, I swear he was snarling, and he was so nasty.
Honestly, he probably gave up. To the nurses. He probably gave up all hope. Did. And I would not.
He did.
I've never met a human that has given up all hope personally, but that sounds like it.
I hope you never do. I hope you never do.
I'm so sorry about that.
And it's just, yes, thank you. He deserved better, and all chronic pain patients deserve better, and that's why we're here. Nobody deserves to suffer like that. So Dr. Tennant made so many good points.
Who's accountable for this? Who is accountable for everyone? Who do you blame for Bob's death?
I blame Dr. Evil, and I blame the CDC guidelines, frankly. Okay. If the guidelines had not terrified these doctors to the point where they did not dare to prescribe, or they didn't prescribe properly, the guidelines need to change, and the doctors need to use their own judgment instead of panicking. And he's not the only one. There's many Dr. Evils out there, and I realize that they're concerned about their licenses, but it's not the first. I've had other people tell me that their doctors have said similar things to them about not risking their license.
Yes, I've had a doctor that did it too.
And where's the Hippocratic Oath? You're going to send someone home. I mean, pain is a symptom that needs to be managed just like everything else. Just like diabetes with insulin, just like high blood pressure with medication for that. It needs and deserves to be treated and not ignored. And yes, try all the non-opioids. I agree. If you don't need opioids, who wants to live with opioids? Right. If you don't need them, no one.
But chronic pain patients are patients that have been sick a very long time. I mean, this is not stuff that just happened overnight. I mean, this is a long, long process of stuff. So, and just like you said, you go through that process. So
yes, you do.
What do you say in response? And I mean, has people called Bob an addict, and then basically, that basically you are just trying to do whatever you can for him, so you're being complicit and stuff like that. What response would you have to say to others that are saying that Bob's an addict and not a chronic pain patient? Has anybody ever said that to you even?
Nobody has ever said that to me. I've always had very supportive people around me.
Good for you.
I'm sure it's coming. I'm sure it's just a matter of time. In my personal circle, and even on the advocacy groups that I've made friends with, people do not say those things to me.
Yeah.
But if they were to say it, I would say no. Go ask the methadone clinic. Apparently, he's not an addict.
And if they say that, they don't really understand what a chronic pain patient is, because it's about quality of life when you're a chronic pain patient. It's about just trying to take the edge off. Nobody's trying to get high. Nobody's trying to
exactly.
You don't get this euphoric feeling or anything like that. You're just trying to take that little edge off so you can go and maybe have dinner with your family.
Get out of bed.
Go out with the kids. Yes, I know. Some days it's get out of your bed, shower. I mean, brush your hair, brush your teeth. Yeah. Maybe have a little bit of happiness, enjoyment.
Yes. Take your dog for a walk or whatever.
I
know Bob would say he never felt high from the medicine. He agreed with you 100%. He said all he got was pain relief. That's the only thing he was addicted to was pain relief.
Yeah. That's a really good way to say it, because I hate to even use addiction, but when somebody ever says that to me again, I'm going to say, yeah, I'm addicted, but I'm addicted to pain relief. Thank you. That's good. Well,
no problem.
What are you doing about the negligence of the doctors and clinics that created this tragic situation, and so Bob doesn't die in vain? What are you going to do about this? And what are you asking of others?
I am going to. I'm asking people, like Dr. Tennant asked, we need to band together. We need to send letters. I have sent letters individually to senators and congressmen with no response, or a very canned response. I don't think they even read it.
They probably don't.
So I agree with Dr. Tennant that we need to do it in force. I would love to see, this is a dream. I would love to see a pain rally where we could actually march, all of us together, and I know a lot of people are too ill to do that, but maybe they could send a family member who's healthy. And if they see a million of us, like the Million Man March, and that they'll have to pay attention to us, because
Well, I know
they're not paying attention to
you
us.
and I were talking about, because a lot, people that are sick or disabled, they can't come out and do that. But we were talking about possibly having a candlelight virtual online visual where we can all be there together. Did you want? I know we're going to meet this week more and talk about it, but do you want to say why and everything, and I can fill in whatever?
Yes.
Okay.
The date of Bob's death was October 11th, 2016, and this was Joe's idea to have a candlelight vigil in honor on his anniversary of his death, but to honor all of the people who have died in vain to suicide from chronic pain, and all of those millions who are suffering needlessly, or who still have their opioids but are afraid of losing them. It's a form of solidarity. And if we could all do it, I'll let her give you the details, but if we could all do it at the same time.
I was thinking 9:30 p.m. at night Eastern time, just because that way, on the West Coast it will be there. But we will be broadcasting live through the website. And I believe he said his favorite color is brown. So if you have a brown candle, if you'd like to put that up on anywhere on social media, send it in to us. That would be awesome. We're going to be creating this event a little bit better, so you'll have all the information, and we'll put it up everywhere. So, but we'd hope that you'd all join in and be a part of that. I think that's a wonderful thing. And I even would like to do, well, here, I'll brainstorm with you a little bit now. I would even like to be able to make this, October 11th, hit that day for chronic pain patients for Bob's Day, or something like that. We'll work on it more. Yeah.
We need to memorialize their deaths, not just Bob, but all of them. We need to memorialize them, or we need to remember them.
Exactly.
And my greatest fear is that some people sweep it under the rug and go on with their life, and that is just not fair to them. They don't deserve that.
Well, and I think a lot of people are afraid to speak out. I spoke a little bit about that last night, but I was even afraid to talk about. I didn't want to do the subject, honestly. I was thinking about doing it a few months ago, and I didn't want to, because I was afraid, what if the treatment that I get now, what if that's even taken away, which is different from what it used to be. Yes. It's scary, but if we continue to follow that way, it's going to be, I said yesterday, it's a matter of if, not when.
Yes.
Yes. Or I'm sorry, it's a matter of when, not if. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to just happen.
I know.
Sorry, it's going to happen. So have there been support groups for victims' families of suicidal deaths? Have you been able to find that for yourself and for your family?
I went to a counselor after this happened, because I had PTSD from finding his body, and I actually had something very helpful called EMDR, which is this weird thing where you wiggle your eyes, but it helped to soften the image. But as far as support groups, there's really not, in this area, any suicide support groups. I went to a regular support group. I didn't find it to be of much help. I would love to form a support group. If it has to be online, that would be fine. I have managed to connect through Pat Anson from Pain News Relief with 2 other widows who have lost their husbands in similar ways. Mm-hmm. And it helps tremendously to be able to speak to someone who has walked in those shoes, and I know there's a lot of us out there. Mm-hmm. I would love to see some support groups for the families and for the patients, and maybe for both. Absolutely. I just don't quite know how to go about doing it.
Well, I would be able to help you with that if you want. I have no problem sharing what I've had to learn, because I just had to do it too. By the way, I did want to mention before I forget, the number 1-800-273-TALK. It is there's professionals there to answer if you're suicidal, or if you have somebody that is thinking about suicide. I just thought I should mention that quickly before I forgot. How can others help so others don't feel so alone, or what they can do to start changing this stuff about the laws, basically? I mean, have you found anything with that yet? And also, are you doing anything about what happened to Bob?
I have joined several pain advocacy groups. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people out there that are tuned into this issue. That's how I found you. Mm-hmm. And I think that had Bob had the opportunity to not feel so isolated, to talk to someone else who was in his shoes, it probably could have helped him through this a little bit more, and maybe they could have given advice. I know Dr. Tennant has a patient who was at the end of the rope. I won't say her name, but she was ready.
Mm-hmm.
She had a suicide plan in place. And through one of these advocacy groups, someone was able to connect her to Dr. Tennant. She was able to become his patient. He was able to prescribe her opioids, and she's alive 4 years later because of one of these advocacy groups. Had she not been in that advocacy group, she probably would be gone. It's really important to share with other chronic pain patients. I encourage all of them to join an advocacy group. There's a whole bunch of them out there. Talk to other people. Sometimes people have, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I've been in a few groups where people buy poppy seeds, and they brew their own tea. People that have been cut off from the opioid therapy, and it gets them through the day.
Yeah, I've also heard about kratom and a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah,
and kratom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are things I didn't know about any of this until I went on these advocacy websites.
Same here. Yep.
There are some little tricks that people know, and if you need to connect with people who've been in your shoes.
Right.
If nothing else, just to vent, but even more so, you may find some little tricks that help you get through the day too. It's all about communication and support.
Yeah, that's great advice. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about before we get going here?
No, I want to encourage everybody to listen to your show, because it's a great show.
Thank you.
And to join an advocacy group. Yes, it is. And God bless you for getting this message out there. It's needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and Bob's story. You are so courageous, and thank you for not giving up and for actually wanting to change things now. And we're actually getting
my honor.
Yeah, a lot of people are just saying thank you for sharing a heartbreaking story. We are so sorry. So, yeah, again, thank you.
Thank you.
I did want to just mention too. So October 11th at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, we're thinking we will let you know more. We want to have a candlelight vigil. It's going to be a brown candle or just a candle, whatever, but we'll be online, and we'd like to see you there or send in photos. I'll put out all the information. But also, I would like to possibly make this every year on this day, on October 11th, going forward in remembrance, and to honor people like your husband, Bob, others that have chosen death over a life in excruciating pain, and for all the chronic pain patients still hanging on in hopes they will have some type of quality of life again, and that they won't have to live in agony every second of every minute of their lives. So we will definitely let you know more. Yeah. Also, didn't Dr. Tennant bring up something about... he was asking if everybody would write in to their senators and Congress. And I was thinking if people wanted to write an individual letter, like he said, which I'm going to write my letter. If anybody wants to send it in to our website or any social media areas, I was thinking we should put it all together, like everybody's, and then send it out to
Absolutely.
each state. So that way they have all of those. And if you don't want to give like your, your actual handwritten one, just scan it, anything, whatever, take a photo, a snapshot of it. But we have to start somewhere, right?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Yes, we do. It's a good idea.
All righty. Well, thank you again, and I hope you have a great night. And I'm so sorry. I really am. But
Thank you.
Bob hasn't died in vain, and you're doing the most that you can. And bless your family and you. And can't wait to work with you more. I'm excited about that.
Me too.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Joe.
You're welcome. Have a good night. All right, Con Nation. Well, I just wanted to say thank you for tuning in tonight. Wow, what a heavy and tough story. But Becky is not the only one. Bob is not the only one. This is happening every day, everywhere in the United States right now. And nobody is doing anything. Just like with Bob. They didn't care. They just let him go. Or what are we supposed to all do? Waste away? There's a lot of us out there. This is not okay. And we need to stand up because that's the only way it's going to change. And I know we are tired and we are, not feeling well. But I don't know. Sometimes when I'm like that and I start focusing on stuff like of what I can do, it helps a lot. And it's actually healing in itself. And it just distracts me. So the pain's still there, but I'm not at least thinking on the pain nonstop. And I just invite all of you to do the same with me. Well, I hope you have a great night, and we'll see you back Tuesday and Wednesday next week. We are going to have, it's Cyber Stalking Awareness Month, so we'll be talking about cyber stalking. Bob Tolse and Susan Pierce will be on. All right, I'll talk to you soon. See you then.
Listening to Conspiracies Against Wellness with Janelle Elgaway. Join us next week to get in on the conversation. The opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts and callers, and not necessarily those of EXG, LLC, its employees, or sponsors. I'm David Chipp.
The Cause Show with Janelle Elgaway is copyright 2017 by EXG, LLC. All rights reserved.